what we'll do is we'll come back to them maybe after a week or two. We'll give them a break. That's the way that we approach the conversation with these target listeners. We'll come back and we'll say, hey, we've been having this conversation. I really think that you'd be interested in listening to this podcast. Let me know. I'll send you the link.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Welcome back to the podcast on podcasting. It's your host, Adam, AAA Adams. And a lot of people out there don't know this, so I'm going to share with you a quick couple of stats. Number one, less than half the podcasters out there have 100 downloads per episode. Not even half of them do. 90% of podcasters have less than 300 downloads per episode. Write that down. It's important. 90% of podcasters have less than 300 downloads per episode. And the top 1% of podcasters have 3,000 downloads per episode or more. 3,000 or more. You're going to want to know that because what we're talking about today is how to get your podcast to rank in the top 1% so that you can have a lot more listeners than you have now. So this is going to be important. We're excited, and it's all hinges on a direct message campaign. It's the thing that we do to trigger algorithms for our podcast clients at Grow Your Show, to trigger the algorithms so that they can get ranked in the top 1%, so that they get 3,000 or more downloads per episode. And some of y'all are excited when you get 3,000 downloads at the end of the year or at the end of 6 months. This is 3,000 per episode. This is 12,000-ish if you're doing a weekly podcast, 12 to 13,000 downloads per month. And for most of you, that's like, oh my gosh, I get that in a year. So this is the way we get you to top 1%. Brian Newell works with our team at Grow Your Show. Brian, what's up? How are you?
What's up, Adam? Pleasure to be back. I appreciate it.
You've been on the show and we're excited to have you. So let's just talk about what is the direct message campaign, just a quick overview so like everybody understands what it is. And then we'll teach them like the exact how to do it so that they can start getting their podcast right.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we do a private message campaign, for example, one of our clients, what we're doing is we're reaching out to their target listener via social media platforms. So maybe that's on Facebook.com, maybe it's on Meetup.com, or maybe LinkedIn.com. And what we're doing is we're looking for that specific target listener for our client's podcast. And we'll reach out, we'll find groups, we'll find individuals, and we'll message them one-on-one, create relationships, and then eventually recommend those podcasts to those people and start to trigger some algorithms.
Awesome. If you're on the Facebook Live right now and you are getting value, please put #value in the comments. Let us know so we can do more of these insightful conversations to help grow your show. All right. The goal is to get in front of more people. How do we do it? What are the ins and outs of a direct message campaign?
Yep. So I'll kind of start at the beginning, right? Just a high level overview. We want to know what the podcast is about, right? What's the topic? So are you talking about real estate? Are you a coach? Are you an author? Are you an athlete? Whatever that subject matter might be, then we want to narrow that down, and then we want to proceed to determine your target avatar or your target listener for your show. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on that, but we'll create specific scripts. It needs to sound natural. We're looking to, again, develop a rapport with these folks that we're reaching out to. We're not saying, hey, we're a marketing company for this podcast, you should go check it out. We're having real conversations about that subject with those folks, and then we're asking them for advice. And then we're reciprocating that advice by recommending our clients' podcasts. So it really works out really great. It takes a long time.
Okay. I will say this. What I'm getting is, regardless of who's listening and who has a podcast, their first consideration is, what is my podcast about? Now that we know what your show is going to be about or is about, now we need to figure out who is the perfect avatar, who's the perfect listener for that show. And also, in a way, for most of us, who's a good person to do business with? So if you're a real estate like syndicator, for example, they raise a lot of money, they attract a lot of capital so they can buy bigger real estate deals. And so your avatar might be, I need a lot of passive investors. So now you know the show is about real estate. The person I want listening is a passive limited partner who's going to just put money with our team. And then you create scripts, but the scripts need to feel natural. What are the 5 purposes? And everybody write this down. Please take a second to write this stuff down. Even if you want to take notes, if you're on the Facebook Live, if you want to take notes by putting it in the Facebook Live as comments, that would be a great way to do it. But here's the 5 things. Brian, how do we trigger the algorithm with these conversations?
So the main goal, right, we need to get through all 5 in the right order. So number 1 is going to be, we're going to get them to follow the podcast. So we want to make sure they're out there. We want to make sure they're looking at the site and jumping on and becoming a subscriber and a follower. We want to make sure, number 2, that they are downloading the episodes. And number 3, we want to make sure that they're listening to the episodes, right? So it's not a bot. It's not some kind of mechanical behind the scenes routine where you're getting a bunch of downloads, but you never see the results. We'll talk more about that, but it can work against you. So we're making sure they're listening. The 4th thing is we're going to try to get a rating and review from that person as well for your podcast. It's going to give you additional exposure. It's going to give you additional social proofing that your podcast is not only valuable, but who it's for. And then the 5th and final thing is to get them to return to your podcast. So keep coming back, right? Check out the latest episode, come back a month later, check out the latest episode. Did you hear it? It was absolute legitness, right? We want to get that message out. So the 5 things in order: follow and subscribe, download the episodes, listen to the episodes, give an honest rating and review, and then keep them coming back.
This is what I'm hearing, just to be clear for the listener, just to make sure it's all out there. During these private message campaigns, as you are messaging different people, having an authentic feeling conversation, the ultimate goal, if you want to trigger algorithms within Apple and Podkite and Chartable and Listen Notes, if you want to trigger something, it has to have all 5 of these. This is what I'm hearing. They've got to follow the show, which is what people used to call it, subscribe. Subscribe and rate. It's just that recently Apple had an update. They no longer call it that because subscriptions are going to be a paid thing later. But now they call it follow. So you want them to first follow your show and then download your show and then listen to your show. And then R&R, I call it. It's not relax and rest and relaxation. It's ratings and reviews. And then you want them to come back. Now, I will share, we have noticed with these 5 things that if you are missing things, and Brian already alluded to this a moment ago. For example, there are people that go to different websites and that promise like downloads, but there are going to be fake downloads. And those people, those bots will say that are downloading them, they're not actually subscribed to the show and they're not actually listening to the show. And the algorithms within these platforms know if it's your followers who are downloading. They know if those downloads are actually being listened. They call it a playthrough rate. You want them to play through at least a certain amount of time through that podcast episodes, or else it works against you. So if you just get a download number, okay, great, you can puff up your chest. I'm proud of you. I'm so happy for you. But it doesn't support you the way that you want it to be supported if they're not also following, they're not also listening to each episode that they're downloading. The 4th one was ratings and reviews, R&R. And this is basically the social proof. Now, there is an argument. I will say a lot of people they're like, ratings and reviews aren't that important. Here's the thing. My opinion is twofold. A, ratings and reviews, if you've ever gone on Amazon to purchase a product, I just did it 2 minutes ago, I think, purchase a product. And yesterday I bought some stuff for my kid's bedroom from Amazon. And when I went on Amazon, my favorite thing wasn't that I got to do it in my underwear. I was excited. I could buy stuff in my underwear. That was great. But it wasn't also that I didn't have to drive. Now, it was snowing. I didn't want to drive. But Again, that wasn't the biggest part. Here's the best part. Here's the reason why everyone really, truly likes Amazon. Because you can see the social proof. You can see that 300 people call this a 5-star. You can see that 1,000 people call it a 2-star. It saves you money and time and effort because you can see what other customers, other buyers, other listeners are saying about that show or about that product. So ratings and reviews are more important than people give them credit for. But then they come up with this argument that, oh, the ratings and reviews don't really trigger the algorithm. First and foremost, none of us know the algorithm. The algorithm might change. We've just seen that it works when you do it in this order. But with that said, I love the fact that the people that are rating and reviewing are the people that are listening, because Apple literally does, we've used the word literally so many times today, Apple Podcast actually goes in and they literally read these reviews. And when the review says something like, oh, I met him at a conference, he's a great guy, they delete those. They actually cut those out and they say, the people are not really rating the show, so we're discounting that. So I'm sure that when your listener who actually listens talks about the podcast, not about your personal who you are, but talks about the podcast and what the podcast value gives, it's going to support with the algorithm, because it always has for all of our clients. And the fifth one was, you said, come back to return to the podcast. How do you get followers and downloaders and listeners and ratings and reviews and comebackers, returners to the podcast? Brian, let's start with, how do we get them to follow? During the private message campaign, how and when do we get somebody to start following a podcast?
Great question. So we don't start out with it. I'll say that. We definitely want, again, have a conversation that feels like you're in the same boat as them. You're looking for the same information. You're interested in the same things. And hey, if you like that thing, I have this other thing that you might want to listen to or that you might want to check out. So just like an everyday conversation, we would start off and let's say maybe 4 or 5 sentences into the conversation is when we would start asking for advice from that person. They would let us know and we would come back following and recommend something back to them. They did us a favor, we'll do them a favor too. And I'll go a little bit deeper into that.
Okay, I definitely want to go deeper into this, because how I'm hearing it, I did hear you say that we don't go straight out with it. We don't just say, hey, follow this podcast. I'm glad you said that, because when I go to I'm not going to use me as an example. I have a sweetheart. When people go to the bar or the restaurant or wherever they meet their relationships, they don't see somebody that's perhaps attractive and walk up to that person and say, you're hot, I'm hot, we should be married. That, it seems like it makes sense, but you know that person's going to
skipping ahead.
Skipping ahead a little fast. So we don't start with it. If you want somebody to follow your podcast, the wrong way to do it is to propose to them the day that you meet them. The way to do it is to have more of a natural conversation in the private messages, in the DMs. And when you have those private messages, it's going to be essential that you approach it like as a friendly person and just asking questions and getting to know each other. Just like when you're dating and courting, that leads to a proposal down the road, down the line, may or may not. It's the way that we've got to do it in the private messages. If you don't have that piece, if you neglect this piece, you're going to get slapped, virtually slapped in the face on the DMs by all of the people. They're going to say, whoa, you're spamming me, cut it out. So you got to kind of lay back, relax, play hard to get, if you will, and slow play, if you're a card player, slow play that by asking questions. Brian, I want to say, let's just say we've got a client they have a podcast, they're a life coach, and the perfect person for them is, let's just say, an exec, like a CEO or something, a C-level. And these people are generally, they work a lot, a lot of hours, they're stressed. This is their avatar. This is who they want. How would we go about approaching? How would we slow play? How would we not ask for marriage on the first time we meet them in the DMs? How would we slow play that?
Yeah. So you're going to target groups of that type of listener, of that type of person. So when you're looking...
Well, let's fast forward. We've already gotten to the group.
Yep.
We've already found the person. How does the one conversation happen with the perfect avatar?
All right. Yeah. So we can certainly jump in. I think the one thing that I'll mention before we go into the maybe examples of what a conversation might look like is there's 3 pieces to our messaging campaign, and that's each and every message we send.
Okay.
It's going to have 3 pieces. It's going to start with a hook. It's going to have a story in the middle, and it's going to have an offer at the end. So I'll give you an example, right? So you're messaging this perfect listener. It's this executive, this life coach potential listener, and you're on a social media platform, and maybe you join the same group as them. You take a look at their profile. You notice they have maybe a cool background picture or maybe a cool successful post. They just got promoted. They just bought a new car. Their kid just graduated college, whatever that might be. You do a tiny bit of research before you send that first message. And that message might look something like, hey, is that a picture of Mount Everest in your background? It looks awesome. Just something that is going to stop the scroll, right? The purpose of the hook is to stop the scroll. And I know they're not looking at their news feed, right? They're not going through different articles and pictures. This is a direct message, but you want to catch their attention and sort of prevent them from thinking that you're spam right off the bat, right? You're not trying to sell them something. You're not trying to get them to invest. I won't put anybody on blast, but yeah, you're not trying to recruit them. You're not trying to sell them something, right? We'll put it that way. So it starts off with the hook. Congrats on your promotion. I love that picture in your background. Your kids, your dog, your family is so cute. Something that just breaks the monotony, right? It's not, hey, my name's Brian. I got this podcast. You want to check it out? And then with just link in the first note. It doesn't work like that, right? You're not going to have much success.
Yeah.
So the second piece of that, right, is the story. So the story is, what do you want them to know in that particular message? So you started with the hook. You got them to read the first sentence. Now you're going to put the story. So, hey, I saw we were in the Facebook group. I thought we would connect with each other. I noticed that you are also interested in professional fulfillment.
Let me keep on this one specific.
Yeah.
It's a life coach. They're looking for CEOs or C-level executives that are overworked, stressed, golden handcuffs, and they want to help them have a more balanced life, for example. So no examples about anything else. Let's only talk about that one avatar for now. So you're saying hook story offer in the very first outreach, it might be something like, I saw that picture on your wall or whatever they call it. Is that Mount Everest? ? The reason I found you is because you and I are both in the same group for CEOs. And then you come to an offer. Curious, what role do you play at your job? So it's all questions. Remember this, ask, don't tell. And that's the same thing with like your social media posts. It's the same thing with anything that you want to be able to grab attention. There's a pattern interrupt that happens when it's personal and when somebody has to stop and think. If you just tell them something, they might like a post. They might say, oh, that person doesn't seem like a bad person, but it doesn't necessarily help them to be able to want to reply. But the personalization and the questions, instead of going to tell and shove everything down their throat, let them build up an appetite. Let them ask you. You want to use those questions instead of telling stuff. So hook story offer, what would be like another example of an offer for that same one? I said, what's your position? What role do you play at your work, or where do you work? Is there any others you can think of, Brian? That might be the offer there.
Yeah, it's just like you mentioned, just sort of a thought-provoking question, something that makes them stop and think. It put me on the spot. How did you make it to that position, right? I saw that you just made CEO. Congratulations. How did you get to CEO? Something like that? Yeah. And you don't want to get too deep, too personal on the first greeting, right? This is just the first sentence that they're meeting you from. And so, just letting them know that you're curious about them and their background. And
Okay, perfect. All right. This beginning of a conversation leads eventually into you mentioning about your podcast of life coaching or your friend's podcast. In our example, we are always the third party for our clients. We're always saying, I know this one podcast is really good and it helps with that thing. So you'll either have to be doing this yourself, or maybe you can do it for your friend's podcast and your friend could do it for your podcast. But Brian, if you could help, I know you deal with this. You run our whole team. Some of our clients have one person dedicated to their show 8 hours a day, every single day. Some of our top clients have like one human being that private messages 40 hours a week. And some of our like middle tier have like somebody even working half their time, like 4 hours a day is just on their one podcast.
that's right.
You manage all of this. So you see, and you basically help everybody make sure that they're doing this well. How long does it take to go from like meeting somebody at a bar, for example, and saying, oh, I like your shirt. Oh, I think I have that same shirt. You shop at this one place too? Or, you're drinking a pale ale? That's my favorite beer too, or an IPA or a red wine or whatever it is. You strike up that conversation. How long from that time might you finally say, hey, there's this podcast that you might like?
Yeah, it generally takes several weeks, to be honest. There's no rush. And I think you mentioned it. It's really a slow play. There's natural conversation. We're not messaging all hours of the day, every day, right? There might be a few days or even a week in between messages. And so as we develop the rapport, we're learning more about that person. We're asking them more questions. They're probably asking us questions too. And then we sort of get into the subject of the podcast, asking them questions about how do you work with work-life balance?
Yeah.
Or, man, I had a busy week. I work 60 hours and I have less time for my kids. How do you handle it?
Yeah.
And so just something that, again,
I love
really
it.
gets
This
them
is
to
so good, man.
reciprocate.
This is so good. This is so perfect. I hope the listener's getting a lot. And if you're on Facebook right now getting value, please put a hashtag value. Let us know that you're getting value from what we're giving you so that we'll do more of these live for you. And by the way, if you got any questions, you can throw those in too. Brian, that's how you get people to follow. You slow play, you take weeks sometimes, just like most of us when we're in our dating phase, we're going to take days or weeks. We're not just swiping right on here, are we? All right. Let's go to download. So for example, is there any helpful tips that you have that the team does when we private message people that gets somebody to not just like follow, but also to download and listen?
Yep. So what we'll do is after we have had a few conversations, and I want to mention this because I feel like it's important, they're giving us advice based on the conversation we're having. So we're asking them, hey, have you found any good resources that I would be able to read or visit, or if there's a podcast you listen to about this subject, about what we're talking about, let me know if there's something you came across that you might recommend.
Yeah. So it could be something like you're already asking, hey, what about work-life balance? And then they're saying like, I don't have work-life balance, or they're saying, I'm working on that still, or they're saying, I learned it over years through podcasts. Then you're saying something like, well, what podcast do you listen to? Is there any resources that you could provide that would help me and other people get that same thing? And then they might share it with us. And then what happens?
So we would take that recommendation and then immediately check it out, see what it's about, get an overview. If they recommend a book, maybe we'll read the back summary. Maybe we'll buy the book, right? Maybe we love it. But really what we're doing is sending them a quick message. I really appreciate that you took the time to give me this. I'm going to check it out this weekend, or I just checked it out. And then we usually reply with one takeaway. So I love the part where he mentions set aside one day a week for XYZ. Or I love how they say first thing in the morning, put a half hour in your calendar to touch base with whatever, right? Like whatever advice they got, we will take it and check it out and
Okay.
give them a little feedback on it. But to answer your question, what we'll do is we'll come back to them maybe after a week or two, right? We'll give them a break and we'll come back. And just like if you find a product on Amazon, if you hear a story from a friend and it immediately makes you think of this one person, like, I got to call that guy and tell him right now. That's the way that we approach the conversation with these target listeners is we'll come back and we'll say, hey, we've been having this conversation. I really think that you'd be interested in listening to this podcast. I just heard the episode. Let me know. I'll send you the link, right?
Yeah.
Get permission. We never send a link without asking first because we don't want them to feel like we're spamming them. We don't want them to feel, most of you out there have received a link, an unwanted link, whether it's a personal message, whether it's an email, and you're just kind of like, whatever, delete.
I get friends. I get like family members. Like my grandma sent me one recently. My brother sent me one. They're sending things like a link or a video. And there's like so much spam about like these unwanted videos that I'm suspicious and skeptical even when my grandma sends it. Well, actually, especially, I was like, Grandma, did you mean to send me a video? Do you want me to open that? And she's like, don't open it. It's spam. It's going to ruin your whole thing. I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm glad I didn't click on it. So all of us, like many of us.
Skeptical times.
Many of us, we see that. And we're like, I don't think I should click on that. I should call my sister. I should call my brother. I should call my friend and say, hey, is it safe that I open that? Especially beneficial for you to not shove the link down the person's throat. What Brian said was so important. We never send a link without permission. Write that down. We never send a link without permission.
Spam-free zone.
Yeah, it's basically like, I just found an amazing episode that taught me how to do a thing. And be happy to forward it to you if you want, ? And they're like, yeah, forward it to me. And then you can be like, okay, no problem. Let me queue it up for you. And then you send them the link to the thing.
You usually throw in a comment, let me know what you think, right?
Okay. And I think it's important to state for the listener or for the viewer, why did you say at the end that you ask them, here's the link that you asked for. Let me know what you think. Quote, let me know what you think. Why is that so important?
Because it puts on them sort of like a responsibility or a feeling of responsibility that, oh, they're going to ask me about it later, right? So we're saying, hey, check this out. I think you'd really like it. And I'll follow up with you or let me know what you think. And then maybe about a week later, a few days later, we'll come back and we will ask them. We'll say, hey, what did you think of that episode you asked me to send you? What did you think of that episode you asked me to send you? Right?
Yeah.
Because they asked us for it, so they better follow up on their end of the bargain, which was, you should probably listen to it, right?
And another piece that I think is brilliant, I'm sorry to cut you off. Another thing that I think is brilliant is earlier you asked them for resources. And when they gave you a resource, you acted immediately by following up and saying what you liked about the thing. Mm-hmm. I feel like they'll feel pretty stupid if they don't follow up. If it's like, well, okay, he got my resource. He told me what he thought about my resource. I better listen to this episode.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So there's a lot of psychology to it. And we try to take advantage of that, right? And get them to respond and get them to listen, get them to download. And then we'll ask them, what was your favorite thing? What did you think? What did you think about what the guest was talking about? Or what did you think about what they said? And they'll usually tell you one or two takeaways that they liked. Oh, I loved how he mentioned time blocking. I love how he mentioned, taking a sabbatical every 3 years, whatever it might be.
This brings us, because we've talked about following, downloading, and listening to the episode, like what we're doing to make sure that they listen, asking them what they thought of it, or, hey, did you get a chance to listen to that? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to know if you thought that it was as good as I thought it was or whatever. But to get number 4 is my favorite, and I would love to share it. How do we get people to rate and review the podcasts of our clients? And how will you get people to rate and review yours? Here's the thing. What we do after we ask, what did you think? Like Brian was saying, they will come back at you and they will say, oh, I liked, and they say what they liked about it. And then we will reply to them with something like this. Now, it'll change for every podcast and every situation. It's never a copy paste. That's important. Remember that none of this is copy paste. You're going to get flagged on all the social media platforms if you try that shiz. So it's not about copying and pasting. It's not about the same repetitive stuff. We do this on 3 platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, and meetup.com. All 3, and especially meetup.com, because this is where we find the avatars, especially Meetup. If you ever copy and paste anything just one time, they will block you for 15 minutes. They'll say, oops, it looks like you're spamming people. Wait for 15 minutes and you can send something as long as it's not the same thing you sent someone else. So we implement that same thing. So don't think that this is the only way to say it, but we get them to listen to the episode and ask them what they thought about it. And they'll respond with a 1-line or 2-line that basically says, Adam has such a beautiful voice on that podcast. Whatever they say. And we'll respond and say something to the effect of, man, those are great words. I bet you Adam would be appreciative if you copied. Now, this is the only time to copy and paste. I bet Adam would be appreciative if you just copied and paste what you just told me and put it on his podcast. So we've got a couple of our clients are named Alex, 2 different Alexes. So we'll say for one of our clients, they'll tell us, oh, I love how Alex talked about taking time off for his family when he does real estate investing. And that was really impactful to me. And we'll just say, dude, that was well said. I bet you Alex would love it if you just copied what you just told me and just pasted it in as a written rating and review for his show. I bet he would appreciate it if you just copied and pasted what you just wrote. And it makes it sound so simple to the person. And we are getting, so far, we're getting between 25% and 33% of the people, if we're connecting with them and they actually listen to an episode, we're getting like a third of them to actually take the time to rate and review the show, which is remarkable results. Because in general, it's only like 1 out of 100 people will do it on their own. And now, because we make it easy, they've already said the good thing to us. We're not saying, oh, I bet he would love you if you go and rate and review. We just say copy and paste what you just wrote right then. That was beautiful. He would appreciate if you just made that into a rating and review, or she would appreciate it. And so this is like a huge, huge piece. Brian, if you have anything else on getting ratings and reviews, please share. And then I want you to teach us, how do we keep the private message people that we're connecting with, our avatars, coming back to the show, like even 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, or even 2 or 3 or 4 months down the line?
Yep, definitely. No, as far as the rating and review, I think you mentioned it sometimes. We always ask for an honest rating and review. We never ask for a 5-star review. And I think that's probably all I would add. But yeah, no, you illustrated it beautifully on how we get that done.
Yeah, that's important. Never ask. Now, if you're a podcaster and you're listening to this, or you're about to be a podcaster, never ask for a 5-star rating. It's the stupidest thing you can ask for, because the person's less likely to even do anything if you ask them for a 5-star. If you just ask them to be honest, they're more likely to be like, oh yeah, I'll do it. And the strangest thing is, so far, every time I've asked people for an honest rating review on my podcast, it's always a 5-star anyway. So it's like, stop asking for the 5-star. People don't want to feel like you're making them do the thing. They want it to be their own idea. So just say, if you liked it, give an honest review. Just honest rating and review. But back to R&R.
Because you want the 5-star to be their idea, not yours.
Yeah. And even if they're going to give you a 5-star and you ask for a 5-star, when they're clicking the 5-star, it doesn't feel authentic to them, because they feel like they were compelled to do it by you.
Yep.
And it's like hard to even push the button, that 5th star. It's like, maybe I'll just do a 4. It's the weirdest psychological change. Please write that down. Okay, so it's my favorite one that did before you started working for the company several months ago. I used to do, it was me we only had a few clients. And I was like working 60 hours a week. And I was the one doing all of the private messaging all by myself from my account. And it was stressful. Now we have a whole team doing it. But when I would want them to come back to an episode, it would be because I was specifically listening to my client's podcast, and there was an episode that like was fire. It was just so good. And I authentically loved it. And that was the date. It wasn't every 2 weeks. There was no like specific cadence in mind. It was, damn, that episode everyone would love. So I reach out to people that I was already private messaging about the podcast. And I'd be like, Dave, did you hear Shannon's last podcast episode that just dropped? ? That was straight fire, right? ? And it was always effective. Dave would say something like, no, I didn't get a chance to send it. And then I'd just say, I didn't get a chance to listen to it. Then I would say, I'd be happy to send you a link if it's helpful, ? And he would say, sure, cue me up. Okay, there's links you asked for. Let me know if you liked it as much as I did. And then we just follow up. So I know that there's probably 2 more. I'm assuming there's like 2 more tips or tricks for getting people to come back that you could share with somebody so that they can do it as well as you can.
Yeah, for sure. As far as examples, again, I love the did you catch the last episode? That always kind of gets them back into the rhythm. Maybe they're downloaded in their queue on their phone, so they'll catch up. There's, hey, I'm just circling back with you to see if you liked the last episode. The last episode of the podcast was legit.
Yeah. And it depends on who the avatar is, right? Because you're going to speak between like the podcaster and the perfect avatar. They're all going to have a different language. So you can't always say legit. You can't always say, damn, did you hear? Some people, that's not their personality. You're going to push them off. Or others, if you're too formal, it's just not the right avatar to be like, okay, excuse me, sir. I was wondering if you had by chance caught the last episode. You wouldn't be that way. It's however you would naturally talk to that type of avatar in their language. That's the best way to do this whole private message campaign. Brian, I want to wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes. And what I'd like to know is if there is anything else that we're missing in order to get people to follow, download, listen, rate, and review, and come back to podcasts on the 3 platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Meetup, using the Hook Story Offer system, which, if I can shout him out, Chad Whitfelt and I, who have done lots of real estate deals together.
Chad's the man.
Millions of dollars of real estate with Chad and I, but he's the one who focused on Hook Story Offer with me. That's the way that I got my brain to wrap around how to phrase like the beginning of a podcast, or how to phrase a title, or how to create a social media post. It's super important stuff. And actually, Chad runs for our clients that we do marketing to grow their show. He still runs all of the digital assets. He's running like the Facebook ads and stuff like that. So huge shout out to Chad. He's making lots of money with crypto as well. But since we're good friends, he still does this.
Love it.
For us.
Yeah. So the first thing that pops into my head that I want to mention, and you can throw out some ideas if there's something that I might miss. You mentioned as we're doing messages not to copy paste, you'll get flagged, you'll get blocked, you'll get your accounts closed. So just one sort of extra note around that topic is the way that we do is, so we're going to have, let's just call it an initial contact script, right? And all I mean by that is that will be the scripting that we would use for the first message for someone, right? And it's different every time for every client, for every campaign. They're all going to be different. But all that to say this, you should have multiple versions of each one of your messages as you get started and as you continue messaging. We like to think of the number 6. The number 6 alternatives to each script you have. And that doesn't mean 6 different sentences, right? It means that if you have 6 different reach out messages, each one of those 6 should have 6 variations so that you never run out of potential messages. And that could be as simple as, hey, name, hi, name, hello, name. And then as you get through the script, every few words, just change something around, flip something, say something after something else, right? Switch the order of the message. Small tweaks and tips just to get in there, but that's super important for the podcaster.
I'll relate it to the last part. So I was saying, like, there's a lot of ways to say, did you hear the last message? Right. The script is, did you hear the last message? But we put it in 6 different versions, and it might be like, damn, did you hear that last message? Or wasn't that last message legit? ? Or OMG, what did you think of that last, not message, episode?
Yep.
OMG, what did you think of that last episode? ? Hey, my friend, wondering if you caught that last episode. You can make, it's all meaning the same thing. It's all meaning that I want you to go back to the podcast again. I want to strike that back up. I want you to know that people are talking about this podcast, but it's not that you're going to have the same exact script that you're paste. You're going to tweak it a little bit. And the first script, I love that you brought this up. It has like parentheses, like for their name. It's like first name. And it might have parentheses, like literally in our template says, insert personal thing here.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Exactly.
And it might have a call to action, like insert call to action here. So it's like a script and you have 6 versions and you'll use different ones and you'll also still personalize it.
Exactly. So it's a loose template giving you ideas on sort of a starting point, a jumping off point as you get to do these messages. And of course, after you've done a few hundred, then they start to come more naturally.
Yeah.
Or a few thousand, like some of us.
I don't know how many I've done, but I think you guys track how many you and the team do. And I was just blown away at the number with so many different people in your team. Like, it's a lot of messages per day. And if you got flagged, it would be a problem. If you got flagged by just like copying and pasting something, it would turn out to our team wouldn't be able to work.
Right.
What could they do? Oh, here's a second step that kind of got missed in what we were sharing. And it's specifically this. I mentioned a little bit earlier that we do these messages on 3 platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, and meetup.com. Why do we do that? We do these messages in like Meetup because there's a period you can only send so many messages in a short period of time before you would get flagged also, even though you're not copying and pasting. And so we get a hold of the avatar at Meetup. We find the perfect avatar and the perfect like listener in certain groups. Do that same thing on Facebook. And we do that same thing on LinkedIn. We can search for certain people on LinkedIn really, really easily. There's all sorts of different, I don't know what they call them right now, but basically narrowing down the search so to make sure you're getting the right person. And when our team does this, and that means you should do the same thing, they'll log into like Facebook in one account. They'll log into their new account through Facebook, and they will start by replying to people, and then they'll do the outreach to the new people on that platform. And then they'll take a break, go to LinkedIn, reply, and then do outreach, and then take a break and go to meetup.com, go to the DMs there, direct messages, PMs, and reply to people first, and then send a few new people. And then they take a break and go back to Facebook, do the same thing, go back to LinkedIn, go back to Meetup. So when we say that they're working on for 8 hours on your behalf, it is never 8 hours straight on one platform. They do maybe 30 or 40 minutes here, 30 or 40 minutes here, 30, 40 minutes here, take a break. And then they do it again, take a break, and then they do it a third time, for example. And you should do it that way too, because then you're not going to get flagged anywhere.
Yep. There's a daily cap limits on messages and a certain number of messages per minute. So absolutely great advice.
Ryan, anything else that would be helpful if our listener or our viewer today really wants to make sure that they get ranked in the top 1% with their podcast so that they can have 3,000 or more downloads every single episode. Is there anything else as it relates to this private message campaign that we could have missed?
I don't think so. They're always welcome to schedule a call with us. You can find a link to schedule a call with me in the comments, and we could always talk about how we do it, what we do, and we're happy to give this template away as a bonus for having a call with us.
All right. If you want the template, because we have this giant template that teaches you in very much detail how to not get flagged, but how to get ranked in the top 1% without getting flagged on the social. I will say 100% this works. This works every time. Our clients are all ranking top 1%. If they're paying to be there, they're there or they're above there, all of them. So I want that to be something that you understand, like this does work. If you want that script, schedule a call, no problem. And we will give you the script without even charging you 1 cent or a Bitcoin, which isn't very expensive today. Right, Brian?
I'm an Ethereum guy.
Yeah, I got a lot of Ethereum too. I like Ethereum, but even Ethereum, that part looked real good for a minute. It was like what, 4,000 and something, and now it's like it was 2,000 and something. Oh yeah. Man! But anyway, we wouldn't charge you an Ethereum. We wouldn't charge you a Litecoin. We wouldn't charge you a dime. We wouldn't charge you a penny, or a yen, or when I went to Mexico, what are those?
Mexicans, pesos.
Pesos, yeah, peso. I was kind of trying to call it a deso, but it's not. A peso, it's nothing. We won't charge you anything. Be happy to help you. Hopefully this was valuable. If you're on the Facebook, put in #value, let us know, and we'll do more of these. And if you're on the podcast, please leave us a rating and a review. A 5-star rating for sure. Wait, I thought we said we don't do that.
No, we don't.
Let me try again. Honest rating.
There you go.
Especially if you got value. Let us know what you think. We do read all of those. And actually, during the time of this recording, we're actually giving away free services. We're doing a raffle. So it might actually benefit you to leave an honest rating, regardless of what you think of the podcast. You'll be win a prize. Entered. So, there you go. Awesome. Appreciate you guys. And I will see you on the next episode.
Adios, podcasters.
By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.